Good afternoon. My name is Ashley, and I'm so happy to have you all here joining us virtually with this fantastic panel before us to introduce Ligado Connects. This is a platform which we are starting today to connect trailblazing women in industry and policymaking with the rising stars who will shape the future. We are nearing the end of Women's History Month. And it's been so great to see organizations and individuals stepping up to celebrate strong women that have impacted them and our society. But at Ligado, we were thinking, why does it have to end in March? We want to keep the conversation going throughout the year and celebrate and recognize and elevate women. We are over half the population after all, and yet unfortunately, we continue to be underrepresented across a broad range of industries in leadership positions. We know that only 6% of CEOs at Fortune 500 companies are women. And despite record growth in recent elections, women still only make up about a quarter of the US Congress. And so we have to be better and do better. And there are many factors that contribute to this imbalance. And our goal here at Ligado Connects is just to keep the conversation going, make progress, and connect women who've done it, like our panelists today, with those who are at the beginning of their journey. And so we are so lucky to kick off Ligado Connects with three amazing women who have blazed their own trail in the public and private sectors and risen to the top within their industries. We have former FCC Commissioner Mignon Clyburn, who is the first female chair of the commission and the first female African-American commissioner. We have INCOMPAS's Chief Advocate and General Counsel, Angie Kronenberg. And we have Valerie Green, who is Executive Vice President of Ligado. And I will say I have had the honor and privilege of working with and really learning a lot from these past 5 years. All of you have had unique and uniquely successful career journeys. And I know the audience, who we can't see, but is all virtual, joins me in just being really excited to hear about your experiences, what you've learned, and advice you have for those that are rising up and the next generation of leaders. Audience, we will take questions following a discussion that the panelists are going to have. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to you all to begin the discussion. You've just heard that Ligado Connects is about bringing together women who've done it and those who are on the rise. And so that brings up the subject of mentors and what it means. And so Angie, I just want to start with you. How important is it for women to have mentors and individuals within their organizations that they can turn to and support in their career development?
Yeah, thank you so much, Ashley. And I just want to say how privileged I feel to have been asked to participate in the inaugural Women in Tech event that Ligado is putting on. So thank you. It is incredibly important for us to find mentors and promoters in our own organizations and outside of our organizations. And I actually am really fortunate because one of my promoters is actually on the panel. If you know anything about my bio and history, I had the incredible honor to work in the inaugural staff of FCC Commissioner Mignon Clyburn. So at the beginning of the Obama administration, and we spent about 4 years together at the FCC. And she's been a wonderful resource for me, just a fantastic boss. Obviously, we spent 4 years together and really had an opportunity to get to know each other and become friends. But even once I moved on from the FCC and came into the role that I'm in right now, she's been a great advisor to me, both with respect to doing the job that I'm doing now and how to further my own professional career. And before I had Mignon in my life, I was really fortunate that I had a couple of partners at the law firm where I worked before I went to the FCC, who also encouraged my development. And that is just really key. What's unique about my own situation is I've now been in the industry long enough and was in the legal industry long enough. I've really had the opportunity to see how much has changed. I was describing to some folks recently about how when I first went to the law firm in the mid 90s, not one female associate had had a baby. In fact, that didn't happen until 2001. And I was the second female associate to have a baby, and that was in 2002. That's not that long ago, people, right? When you think about, and then just what we had to go through, right? Like just getting accustomed to women in the workforce with young children, working at these law firms that have really, high billable requirements and all kinds of requirements on us in order to be promoted. And then going into the government, too, to have a different experience. So I've watched the industry really change, promote a lot more women going up into the chain of management. And what I have seen is that it has been incredibly important for women to have available to them folks who believe in them and who are willing to put their name behind them to say, yes, this woman, she has the right stuff. You can count on her. She will grow your business. She will meet your needs. And so that is really important. Now, I'm going to stop there because I know that the lovely ladies on this panel will have more advice about, well, how do you find these promoters? So I'm going to hand off to them about how you go about and finding the folks who can mentor you and promote your career.
Great. Commissioner Clyburn, you want to take that one?
Well, I'll first let me say how great it is to be here, and sorry about the environment. I am in someone else's home, and they have if you turn on a certain news station, they're on. So I got kind of kicked off. So give a little. If you keep moving and hear this deep voice in a few.
Adaptability, it's the word of the year, right?
Absolutely. And I really think, that accidental segue, you said it all with the word adaptability, because when we speak of mentors and when we speak of trailblazers, and when I say trailblazers, it doesn't have to be this big headline, but the first here, the first there. Sometimes there are not role models who look exactly like us. And sometimes we have to go out of our organic sphere of influence to get advice, to unfamiliar territory, to places and spaces that don't neatly fit into where we find ourselves. Because what you will find are a lot of common denominators for success. So your mentors can come in all shapes and sizes and in all places. That person helping to clean up that space could be the biggest supporter and validator and information conduit to you. And so I really think a lot of times we look at mentors and supporters as those who are above us in terms of rank. That is not only always the case. And so I think when we find ourselves, and we will, frustrated in certain places where we are the one and only, and we seem like we're on this island, with no return. Pause and take note of those characteristics that you will find all around you that would be applicable to that particular space. So, I just challenge everyone to, when it's not there, adapt and look outside and embrace a lot of the journeys of others.
I think that's great advice. There's before I just jump in, I do just want to say thank you so much to Angie and Commissioner Clyburn for being here for this first event. It's an honor to be with both of you. And in our couple of conversations leading up to this, I've been so excited to share this topic with you because of the experiences that we've all had, many of them overlapping. And the theme here that we're all talking about is how important it is not to try to do it by yourself, but it's okay to ask for help. And you can do better if you ask for help. You can ask for people who have gone before you and been successful. You can look to your peers for support. But I think given where we all are, one of the things that we know, because we know how important it is what kind of a role managers, people who have sort of gotten there, wherever your there is, the role that managers have now in making sure that it's not as hard for the next generations to come after us, right? So it's great to have mentors and people who back you. I don't know, but in my experience, sometimes finding that person was nothing more than luck, right? You know, it's a like adaptability and just being open to what might come, but there's always a lot of luck. But we can be so intentional given where we are in making sure that we and our colleagues are resources for people who are striving now and, you know, and trying to get to the next level in their career. And that's kind of the way we pay it forward. And just also, like, I don't want the next generation to have it as hard. Would like to make it easier, right? And so, you know, when we've been talking about it, we've been thinking, how can we make it our responsibility so that it's easier for younger women and for people who are bringing diverse backgrounds and other diverse experiences, to make it easier for them to find people who can help them and guide them.
And I appreciate you saying that, Valerie, because what I caution, and this is very easy to do, for all of us to not look at that as a burden, not look at that as something or some ways where that is such a heavy lift that you that is way too much, that you almost oh my gosh, almost self-sabotage. And so it, you know, for me, respect and embrace your imperfections. You're not going to get it all right. In a way, there's a way for you to point out where others have fallen short, where somebody might be trying to pretend that everyone else who might not look like you, might not be the same gender, has done it all right. So it's interesting. We have to recognize certain things, that we might not get the same passes as others. That is absolutely true. But we also need to give ourselves a pass sometimes. And I think often we do not, and that really, in a lot of ways, is not helpful to us, and it's not attractive to others when they see, because they might not want to try to blaze that trail if they see how stressed we are. And I'm not saying don't show it. I'm just saying do not allow that to be such a heavy lift or heavy burden that it scares the next person to come around, or if it really can literally and figuratively make us ill. So striking that balance and know when to say when, and know when to challenge, and know when to pause. You know, all of those things that we do in our everyday lives are absolutely applicable in the professional space.
Yeah, I think about managing the whole person. I mean, I'm in this situation. I have a small team that I manage, but it's really important to think of them not just as employees, but whole people. They have families at home, pets they're responsible for, parents they're responsible for, and keeping that in mind. And I'm a type A personality, so I always have expectations of everyone, right? And just remembering, like, okay, wait, this person is a person. They're not just doing their jobs. And during COVID too, it's a very isolating experience. Like, technology is wonderful, and I'm so happy to work in an industry that's bringing broadband to so many people to keep us connected, but it's still a very isolating experience. And keeping that in mind as I'm managing my team of people, about what can I be doing to make their lives a little bit easier and a little gentler during this time. And then also being gentle to myself and keeping in mind that, no, it's not going to be the same as it was. It's going to be different, and it's going to remain a little different for a little bit longer. So let's think that through before, you make that comment or make that statement, like, oh, okay, pause. Really just being incredibly thoughtful and mindful about my own actions, and how my actions then can better support and better consider, what other people are going through, male and female. And I think that's what's also really just great about where we are right now in the industry, and also where we are as a generation of women in management, because I do think we bring a very unique perspective as managers because of our gender and what we've gone through ourselves.
That's right. I find that when you take that approach that you're describing, Angie, where you look at the people on your team as whole people and remember that they have lives outside the office, and you really try to find specific ways to connect with them on those other aspects of your life, they are better at their jobs because they feel respected by their workplace, by their boss. They sort of want to do more, and they find a way to kind of integrate work into their life in a different way rather than keeping it at arm's length in some ways. And so you just get a better work product when you have a personal connection with the people who are on your team. And that's definitely not something that we were taught. At least it's not something that I was taught by my managers. I mean, when we were young lawyers, we just didn't have that. There was nothing like that. And so, you were just seen as somebody who was working and, adding value, literally watching the number of hours that you were working, racking up, that kind of thing. But that is one of the things we know. And like you said, it's not so much a heavy burden. It's like this privilege of being able to impact what a workplace looks like as a manager and what the culture of a place is and who's on your team and all the different experiences they bring. It's not something we got much training in, right? Because we are really like a generation of people who are thinking about it this way. But, hopefully it makes workplaces better for everyone. And gives more people an opportunity to be successful in those workplaces, because success isn't just defined one way.
And I hope that this segment is viewed by, others than those who we may be targeting by way of month, because it made me think about my approach, particularly my years at the FCC. I was very intentional about putting family first. When you came, Angie can tell you, when you came to me, and if something, and the look, the body language, when something might have happened, somebody might have, I pick on Angie, Jenna might have fallen off a beam or if something were to happen, I will tell you to go home. I will affirm that you put family first. And I cannot remember one single time when somebody didn't try to take advantage of you, because you have people who will do that. Let me be clear. But I don't think, and I hired sincere employees that wanted to get the job done, that wanted to prove as much about what they could do as I wanted to prove how much I could do. And when you have that, framework, when you have that understanding, and when you have that drive, putting family first is a positive, not a negative, because Angie and others found a way to do after the splint was set and the like. Nothing lacked. We might have had a shifting of responsibilities. Everybody said, you're going to have to take this portfolio for a week or two. We did have that, but the organization in and of itself not only did not suffer, because we were such team, family first, because our office was that way, a lot of the other advisors that would not have organically learned other things within other portfolios got a chance to do that. And so I think we need to tell our male-centric, and I said not just male, but male-centric, because, they can be a little centric, bosses, that this is a positive. Doing this will get you better results. It already has been proven to be financially and economically more enhancing to have diverse, to have more women, to have more POVs, points of views inside of our workplace places. That's proven. Whether you embrace it or accept it or not, that's validated. It's been validated for years. But if you approach and meet people where they are and shift things a bit to allow the workplace, the environment to work a little differently, maybe for a little bit of time, you get better results. Because, maybe, Louis or somebody else, or, and I don't know why I mentioned Louis, but anyway, someone else might look at, Angie's portfolio a little differently than Angie. And then it's like, well, I hadn't thought about that. And so these are the types of things that happen when we go we shift away from what we have been taught traditionally, how the organization has been run traditionally, and we get phenomenal results for the most part as a result.
So we're going to get back to, there's a lot of good stuff in there around gender diversity and the importance of the role of management as we think about how do we level the playing field, particularly in helping women advance and move up, right? And progress in their career development. But I do want to kind of just take a step in a minute and say, you all have managed to get to the very highest levels of, historically male-dominated industries, and you clearly the women that are on the rise are going to benefit from having you all there. But is there a moment that you remember where another woman along your path helped elevate you? I mean, whether that was a superior or someone that you was working with you, but that you can think about that was like that moment was one where I was like, things are changing. And kind of, if not, was there a misstep that you made where you wish you had someone there with you, and what did you learn from it? And I'll open that up. Maybe Valerie, do you want to start with that one?
Missteps.
Okay,
There's been a lot, but
well, I'm framing it so we could, there's been, we women sometimes, I think, do need to celebrate one another a little bit more than when we do. We're naturally like, I remember when I didn't do that right. But there's,
I do think actually that that we all make a lot of mistakes, and that's actually okay. So, I think that's how you learn. Those are lessons we teach our kids. Like it's, sort of like when you fall down and you skin your knee, that's how you learn resilience. And the mistakes that we've made have gotten us, to where we are as much as our successes. But, actually the question that you asked about, are there moments along your career where you realized how much things have changed? There have been moments like that, but one moment that really sticks out for me actually is a moment where I realized how much things hadn't changed as much as I thought, and that maybe I was taking some things for granted. And it really was not that long ago. I was thinking, Angie, you were talking about, in the 2000s when the first associate had a baby, but this was actually this was during the Obama administration. And actually this was an appointee at one of the agencies who, we were talking about her work and what she was doing. And I was mentioning something about my children or something like that. And she said, confidentially, she said to me, I have kids too. And I said, confidentially. She said, yes, I haven't told any of my colleagues where I work that I have children because I don't want them to see me as a person who has children. Like that I was just floored. I mean, this was just very recently. And I thought to myself, here I am thinking we've made so much progress. And I look around and I see women, climbing the ladder. I know there are big glass ceilings that we're all aware of, and there are women who are still struggling. But, I had really thought we had made progress to the point where, being a mother and having the fact that you're a mother play a role in your life at work was something that was okay. And here was a peer of mine, actually, she was younger than I was, just feeling afraid to talk about it. And it reminded me how much more there is to do. And not to really let our guard down until we really see our workplaces, our legislative bodies, our government all reflect really what our population looks like.
Wow.
It was horrible.
Yeah, I can't even.
And I was going to say it's speechless. Right? I just my reaction. I don't know if y'all saw my face when you said it, but I'm like, wow, that is just. I mean, what man would ever hide their children? I mean, they just wouldn't. So why would a woman hide her children? Because she feels like she's going to be discriminated. So I mean, we still have a long ways to go. Then,
right? Because people make assumptions. They make assumptions that if, someone stubs their toe or gets suspended, that it's going to be us, first out of the gate. And maybe that increasingly that's not the case, 100% of the time. But and you said the person was younger than you, and it was the 2 administrations ago. That I find that moment. That's very sobering. It really is, and it just shows. And I don't know if that fear was justified, but was her fear, so it was justified. You know what I'm
That's
saying?
right.
You know, and so that's the part that you sense something about your environment that would lend itself to that, that you had to put on that facade or hide something that should be a superpower in your life. That and I think that's a part of it. You know, you've got this is not applicable to me, but you are balancing family and children and work life and just, you know, just at gang, you know, just doing it in a phenomenal ways, which your male counterparts would just fold. You know, they fold when they get a hangnail. You know, and so and so it is just incredibly interesting that that society still does not value and revere, you know, that what we do every day, you know, as women, what we balance and what we bring every day as women, with the responsibility, probably 85% of the time, falling on us, in the traditional or non-traditional home space, especially if it's non-traditional, you know, home space. I just, you know, I say that it's an expectation in a way, but it's not one that we shouldn't work to cure. I didn't say that as eloquently as I wanted. You know, we see improvements. Valerie mentioned a lot of improvements. The numbers are better. The number of CEOs, you know, you see it, but it's still an announcement. I mean, it's still like, yeah, you were still yaying about it, which means it's still an anomaly in a lot of ways. So we can't take our feet off the pedal, and we cannot point at some wonderful examples and say that we have arrived. Because, you know, Ashley, you mentioned the statistics in ways in which we, you know, would interpret that if we were to stay on this same course, the last figure I saw was, you know, upwards of 70 years before we were at par.
I mean, we can go, yesterday was pay equity day, right? I mean, we're still so far from that as well. I think on current trends, it may be 2060 when we're there. So absolutely. And I think it raises a really good point. I mean, in this last year, more than ever, you know, there's no question that women often, as we've just talked about, disproportionately carry the burden of being a primary caregiver. I think, and when I say that, I mean, whether or not it's children, siblings, parents, spouses, it's across the board. And this year has, you know, I think some would say there has been a little more parity when you kind of work from home. But on the other regard, we've seen women having to drop out of work at rates that are much higher than their male counterparts. And so there is this constant push and pull, no matter where you are in the caregiving, you know, spectrum. And so I do want to say, just if we can spend another moment, because remember here, we have women who are, you know, maybe a couple decades behind us right now, listening in here, who are at the beginning and giving a lot of thought to what choice do I have? Is it a choice or is it not? Right. And so what advice do you all have for women who are at the beginning and how they manage what feels like a tension? And I think there is a role for companies to play in this as well. Angie,
yeah, my advice would be to really understand where you are and where you're going. Do your homework when you're looking for that job about the culture that you want to be in, but also recognize things are far from utopia right now, right? Like women are still facing issues, but be very intentional. You know, when I went into the law firm, now this was decades ago, I probably wasn't as intentional as I'm saying you should be now. And I would still do it again because I learned so much in that environment, but it really culturally was not the right place for me with young children to be raising my family and working. So I made a deliberate choice when I realized the chances of me getting promoted here are really, really slim. I need to look at my next thing. Where was I going to go? How was I going to do that? And really talking to people. And I talked to men and women about the situation and what I should do next. And you have to be willing to take some risks. So do your homework, but also recognize that sometimes risk does pay off. And I did not land. My first job at the FCC was not working for Commissioner Mignon Clyburn. I took a chance. I mean, I went into a bureau division attorney level position. It wasn't even the time that I took it wasn't even a management position. Luckily, they saw my talents, and it wasn't very long that I wasn't in a management position. And then 18 months later, I met Mignon, and then, was promoted to come work in her staff. So it's important to think things through and seek the advice. This is where I think, talking with your mentors, talking with your advisors is really key. And I'll say one last thing, just to kind of bring a little personal note to this. So my oldest right now is a freshman in college. And I've been trying to instill in her from very early stages about how to do this and how to be very deliberate in your thinking and figuring out, and of course, she's still very much at the stage of what I want to do with my life. So I've been talking to her about my own experience. Her father's been talking to her about his experience. And then we've been encouraging her to talk to other people kind of in various industries so she can understand, what it is that she needs to be thinking about as she's looking at various career opportunities and what she should major in. So it's advice I kind of give across the board, no matter what your age level is, whether you're a college student, whether you're at your entry level position, or even mid-level to senior position, be very deliberate and do your homework.
Anyone else have anything to add there? No. All right. Well, there we go. Do your homework.
Can I just also be open to taking chances, right? Like that's, Angie, you took a chance, right, when you left the firm and went to the FCC, and so you thought about it, but you can go to places that have already made changes and that might be welcoming environments already, or you can go to places where there needs to be change if you're up for that task, because we each have a role to play in this. If we're going to make the type of change that we really want to make, each of us has a role to play and a responsibility. And so, when you went to the FCC and you climbed up through there and ended up in the acting chairwoman's office and the commissioner's office, you did that by doing that. And Mignon, you did that by the diversity that you built on your staff. And so sometimes you find yourself in a place where it's not what you thought, and you can just still be yourself. Just be respectful, of course, but be true. And if you do that, you do a good job, and you express your views about why something is wrong or why something isn't working, just be in a place that's open. That's all. Even if it's not perfect, even if it's not a place that's already, enlightened and knows all the right things to do, you can make a difference from within sometimes too. And that's important. That's how we're really going to spread the type of change, is for some people just like, jumping off the deep end of the diving board into the deep end and, hoping it's okay. And then doing what you need to do when you get there.
So apparently the two plugs I unplugged was not the ringer plug. So sorry about that. But what I will add to that is, when you speak about taking chances, it's on the manager or the boss should not be exempt either. What Angie alluded to but didn't say explicitly was Angie was in the wireless bureau, if my memory is correct, and I needed a wireline advisor. So I was like, do you know anything about this? And she's like, well, we do some, because, we administer this. I mean, I took a chance because I heard a lot about her. And, everybody validated that she could, do anything. And I was like, I'm just going to take a chance on we took a chance on each other. And so those risks, again, the background doesnand have to be, verbatim, what the position calls for. And you can sense most of the time what that person's abilities are, how adapt, how much they can adapt, how you need to adapt. And for me, as was mentioned earlier, looking at, wireline, which at the time was the kind of the old man in the room, looking at, that particular portfolio differently. And so I challenge, not only, as you taking an educated bungee jump, but as those who are in management listening, that is applicable to you. You're not exempt from considering that talent outside of the mean or outside of the norm or outside of a certain school or outside of a certain community or, all of those things where it hasn't been. Trailblazers are made and created. They're nurtured and birthright should not be the only right. That is not the only rite of passage here. So, I challenge all of us to, color outside the line and embrace and accept, take a chance. I mean, not bungee jumping without, making sure the parachute, everything in the parachute. I don't recommend that at all. You might want to check that parachute before you jump. But trust your sixth sense or whatever number that is for you. Trust that because it's 90 times out of 100, it's steering you in the right direction.
Well, this has been great and I can't even believe it, but we're already kind of nearing the end and we have to have time for QA from our audience. And so we already have some coming in. So I'm just going to start. First of all, Commissioner Clyburn, you got a fantastic shout out about kind of your people just appreciating you sharing your experience and the importance of teamwork and treating, your whole team and others with mindfulness and the importance of that as it relates to team and teamwork. Okay, so here we go. First question, an anonymous attendee, so we don't even know their name. Look at that. What can young women employees do to change their workplace culture from within? So we've talked about some of what management can do and the responsibility that you all have as leaders, but what can young women do to help change the culture? Valerie, you want to start?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Okay.
I think the first thing that anybody who's starting off on their career needs to do in any workplace is the first thing you need to do is you need to build kind of credibility and demonstrate, that you are a reliable, trustworthy, competent, committed employee, which once you've done that, and I know if you're at the beginning of your career, you don't, and you're excellent, which all of you I'm sure are, you don't realize that actually is not all that common, that you get, that as managers, all of your employees are not always excellent, to be totally honest. And so it's really true. If you demonstrate, it's kind of like what Mignon was saying about Angie, right? She heard that she was great and that she could do anything. And so she took a chance on her. And so I think before you try to go in and necessarily change anything, you just want to do your job really, really well. Because once you've established yourself as an excellent colleague and, and really a good value add for the team, you'll kind of find that people are just more open to hearing your ideas. And then, you talk to your colleagues about, hey, what do you think about how are we doing on whatever the issue that matters to you? Are we doing enough around social responsibility or ESG? Are we doing enough for performance reviews? Are we giving people enough opportunity for career advancement? You can find ways to have those conversations, but all of those conversations, you don't want to do it on day one because you need to just really sort of establish some credibility and some trust and be excellent. And then I'm telling you, the doors just in many ways, they kind of open because people don't want to lose good people. And they want good people to feel comfortable because that's what makes you more productive. And so I think part of it is that. And then starting with your peers, getting a sense of where things are and having some very specific ideas, picking a thing that's really important to you, going to your manager. Could we introduce this concept? Could we do something like what we're doing here, right? Like, can we celebrate Women's History Month? Or could we, pick a specific thing? And I think you'll slowly start to see other people have been thinking about it and are glad to have you raise it, and they'll start to come to you. But so I think if you start off by just doing a really good job, and then start off by, just taking one step at a time, you really can make a big difference. And you'll find allies.
And I guess mine is similar to that. Once you get, figure out where the the break room is, what, assuming you have one in this day and time.
We ever get back to them.
To me, find that place or that road less traveled. Find something, become that subject matter expert in a place or in in a particular field that is complementary or that would empower or better enable something or some things that are done all the time, but you know that it's a blind spot somewhere, or we all have blind spots. So if you could figure out, I think this is needed here and this would complement or augment this, and you become that go-to person. And if you figure out those 1, 2, or 3 things that would be applicable across different, if you're in a firm, but across different sectors or lines of efforts within the industry, you want to be that person that, I hate to say it, that you're the only one in the room that knows whatever it is. Whatever that thing is, if you can find whatever it is and you just deep dive, just read it until you just can read and consume no more. And you become that person, you become indispensable. And that to me, I say that to everybody, your part-time job is to become indispensable. That's got to be, your primary job is what your boss tells you. Your secondary job within that same outfit is to become indispensable. That should be your goal. What can I learn? What do they need? What is missing? Where are the blind spots to become indispensable? You will excel if you're in an environment that recognizes good talent. Going back to doing your homework to make sure that will happen. But if it's in an environment and you've done your homework and you're pretty sure that you would be rewarded, to me, that's the key, for moving to the next level in a time frame that that would be pleasing and uplifting for you.
Great. All right, we have kind of another one, and I just think this is interesting with respect to mentorship, because I know, Valerie, you'd mentioned sometimes it's luck, right? Like you just kind of happen to find yourselves around good people. But, what are some ways to go about asking? Do you ask for mentorship or forging that kind of relationship?
I'll take this one.
Great.
I do think that it's important to have a conversation with someone about wanting to spend more time with them to seek their advice, especially, in the situation where you're looking outside your organization. And I think it's really important to communicate what you're looking for and what kinds of advice would be most helpful, and allow the person, to say yes or no, right? And then internally within your own organization, and depending on your size, Compass, we're a really small team. So I like to think of myself as being the supervisor and being the mentor for my team. But making sure that if they need some room, to be able to have conversations with others in the organization, that I give them that room to do that, because we each have something really unique to offer and unique perspective. Both in terms of seniority, experience in the industry, right? But then also we see things a little differently from each other. Even if we've all been working together for the last 5 to 7 years, we're still individual people with our own perspectives and can still learn from each other. So I would, really think through who it is that can help you the most as you're working on various issues, thinking through various issues. And ask that person to play that role. I think that's really key, both inside and outside your org.
I think it's a really important point you make with respect to being specific, right? There's a lot going on in our world right now. And in some ways, the interconnectedness of it all enables you to reach out to people outside of your industry more easily. But in other ways, there's so much information coming in that, to really try to have a specific ask and how someone wants to help you. I found that people want to help, right? We want to help, but they have to kind of know how you can help and how they can best serve you. So I think that's really good advice. Okay, here's one. We have, I'm sure, and I think it's been talked about a lot lately, which is good. We need to keep talking about it. I'm sure we've all been interrupted before, right? During a conversation, or someone's taking credit for an idea of ours, or, but specifically someone in the audience is asking, have you been kept out of a room or excluded from a meeting or a conversation because of kind of maybe who you are or your gender? And I guess, how did you handle that? And do you have any, It still happens all the time. And, as you're kind of thinking about, I want to move forward and I want to be heard, but, it's a tough position. And I think particularly tough when you're early on in your career.
So I would say all of the above. And Angie and Valerie probably will answer it better. I mean, I've shared this story a lot that there was a government affairs person when I was at South Carolina commission that told one of my colleagues that, they were uncomfortable around me because they didn't know what to say. And I'm like, well, what do you say to, when the person, conveyed it, I'm like, well, what do you say to everybody else? Which, you can answer that question two ways. If you're so uncomfortable and you're saying, and you're talking to everybody else, what the heck are you saying that you would be uncomfortable around me? Maybe I'm interpreting, that differently, but it showed, it was very evident. And I didn't get asked to lunch. I didn't get asked to hang out. And I would speak and, and I've had to work on this too. This is a two-way street sometimes. That I'll say something, crickets. The person puts another verb there, the best idea since, fire. And so you get that, because they don't hear you. And, I don't know if it's the intonation. I don't know what other barriers to communications. Sometimes it's us, most of the times it's not. But those things happen. And that is how and why you need to be, as Angie mentioned, you really need as much as possible to do your homework about the type of environment that you're about to, go into to affirm that they listen to all good ideas. I mean, you can't be 100% sure, but you can darn sure look at, the space and who's doing what to get a sort of a feel. For who's being listened to and who's being promoted and the like, by just looking at their website and who's got certain titles and who's speaking where and all of those things. You can get a pretty good idea of that culture. So that's going to happen. That's going to happen in 2021, 21. That's just going to happen. But hopefully it will happen less in terms of the degrees. It will continue to tamper. And in terms of, how do I want to put this? The consequences won't be as hurtful and harmful, because I was kind of hurt by that. I can put on my face and, use a couple of choice words that I won't use, even though we're not on television. There were some words I can use. You guys know me, I can use them. But I was kind of hurt by that. I'm like, well, why am I so different? Obvious that you are uncomfortable being around me. In, this is not 1900, and so those are the types of things that, again, we need to challenge, but we need to recognize that sometimes, respectfully, we're dealing with Neanderthals. And we have to treat Neanderthals. Okay, I said it. Yeah. And we might have to treat Neanderthals a little differently, not giving them a hall pass. That is not what I'm saying. But we have to recognize, sometimes take a deep breath and teach the Neanderthal if they're willing, work around the Neanderthal if they're not. But hopefully we'll all recognize the Neanderthal before we sign a contract.
Yeah. I mean, truth. Valerie, Angie, anything else to add to that, or see it, say it, call it out? Okay.
I think that's right.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, is there, has there ever been a time where, you kind of regretted anything or a way that you've handled it? I mean, that's and that you've learned, you're like, Actually,
I walked out of a meeting one time.
Well, there you go.
I walked out of a commission meeting as a state, and I came out and told my mom. She said, never walk out of the meeting. You don't know what they said after. You don't know what the resolution, if anything, was. So I was immature. I was mad. I think I was justifiably upset. But I walked out of a meeting, and unless you are being physically, you're being harmed to a degree that it's, I mean, you will recognize when you have to leave. I mean, if you're about to be harmed, yeah, leave. But if it's anything short of that, you stay in that room, even if you're not being treated, especially equitably, and you figure out by listening to every sentence until the meeting is adjourned. And I said some things too, like, no, I'm not going to even say it was real. It wasn't my finest moment.
Sure.
Like rain and what. Yeah. Anyway, I said it. I don't know how I got to the FCC, but I said it. And you do that. That's a part of the growing process. I shouldn't have said, whatever the equivalent of rain that we all know that might be a certain color. But anyway, you learn that, you grow from that, and you still excel. Yeah. But you remember that because that's your check. That shows how far you can go and how far you should never go again. So yes, absolutely, we make them. But to me, it's about not when you stub your toe. It's how you recover and how you live until you can run again.
Yeah, I think the commissioners are just really showing that sometimes these situations are really hard, right? And we all make mistakes, as Valerie says. I mean, Lord knows I'm never perfect in all of my reactions. And there are times, I had a recent situation where I felt like it was a male person who spoke immediately after me and was saying the same things. And I was like, does this person actually realize that he's saying the same thing I just said? And sometimes I think it's unintentional. Like it's not an intentional act. Some people, that's how they talk, is they like to talk. They're thinking out loud by talking and processing. And when sometimes you're in a meeting. So I like to try to, as I've gotten a little older, I've tried to give more grace and think that it's coming from a different place, that it may not really be intentional, and that there are times that I need to be more mindful about my own reaction to events, so that I'm not overreacting because their actions may have nothing to do with the fact of my gender. That's just who they are and how they process and how they think and how they talk out loud, right? So I think, be careful about the lens in which you see things. Not everything's about gender. Not everything's about, one issue or another. We're complicated people. And I have more of an appreciation for that now as a 50-plus-year-old woman than I think I did when I was 30, 35.
And the phases of our evolution, they matter. They do color how we react. So, we got to figure out when to hold them and when to fold them. I hate what am I bringing up? Anyway,
Kenny Rogers.
Yeah,
He's so right. He's so right.
Yeah, but sometimes I see some of the my younger younger counterparts like leave and quit. I'm like, well, why'd you quit? Well, such and such. I'm like, and we're thinking about as people who might have been working in the 80s. I'm like, really? I can't tell you how many Me Too moments I've had. I'm not making any excuses, but you quit because what? But so I don't know. So maybe that's progress too. that that I should have quit during the Me Too moments. But anyway, the good and the bad about it is the things keep moving and the goalposts keep shifting. Thank goodness.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness that. But I if there's anything I will say to the younger set, breathe a few times, go take a time out before you quit. Make sure that it is for the right reason, not because your feelings hurt, not just because of, not even just because you were wronged, but make sure your quitting sends the right message that doesn't hurt you more than the association. Again, a toxic environment, leave.
Right.
But an environment that might not be that, you could possibly change by changing it. Mm-hmm. Think about it.
That's right. Well, with that, it's a really nice segue into our final question. And we have to be brief because we really are almost out of time. And it's been so great to be with you all today. And, I'm going to stay in touch with all of you, and obviously you, Valerie. But as we put together kind of our next series. But I think just the last question, I mean, a lot of really good thoughts today. Commissioner Clyburn, pause, take note was something that I thought you kept talking about, like just, and that is something I know even myself, you learn as you continue to grow in your career, right? It's you can speak up and you should speak up, but pause and think first, right? And then have your reaction. Resiliency, speaking up, these are all themes that you all have touched on today. But really quickly and briefly, as brief as we can, if you could give your early career self one piece of advice. So back to when you, Valerie, were heading into law school or just graduated, like one piece, like what would it be? Who wants to start? Valerie?
I think there are really two things to keep in mind that, and I didn't always do this perfectly. So I really do think that one thing is just to not overplan it. Be open. My entire career, after I left the law firm, everything's just if I'd planned it, you would never have planned the life I've had. And that's probably true for you, Angie, and for Mignon too, right? Like when someone says to you, what about doing this thing? Don't be like, oh, that's crazy and it's off my path. Just really think about what you can get. And so I think being open to a lot of different ideas and a lot of different opportunities is really important. Experience is experience, and you will learn from whatever it is that you do. So just be open, I guess, would be the number one piece of advice that I would have given my younger self, and that I really try to give to people. People ask all the time, like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I hate that question, right? Like, I just think that's one of those, if you know where you see yourself in 5 years, don't waste your time on this call, because you already have all the answers and you can't learn anything from anybody else. So try to be open to whatever's coming your way. And I think that that's really hard if you're ambitious and you're anticipating that you're going to face resistance, which you probably will. It's hard to just sort of, be like, oh, I'm open to whatever. But I do think that experience is valuable. And then the other thing I would say is really try to be honest with people about who you are and what you're good at, and also with yourself about who you are and what you're good at. Find a couple of things you're really good at and do those things. You try new things for sure, but just don't, if you are a person who doesn't really want to work hard, don't take a job that's for people who wants to work hard. If you are a person who loves an environment of type A's, don't go work with a people, but don't pretend to be something you're not.
Yeah.
That's how you're going to be the best at whatever it is that you're doing and the happiest. That's kind of goofy.
No, be your authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Your authentic self.
Yeah.
I would have told the young Angie to don't be afraid to talk up the work that you actually do as a very young associate. And I came from a culture where women were not taught to speak up for themselves. And it was unusual for a woman to want a career and work outside the home and have something beyond being a homemaker. And so I was not, even though I'd gone to law school, I was not accustomed to having to speak and talk the work up that I was doing and what I had accomplished. And I think that did hurt me internally at the firm as well as externally too. And I know a lot of people who may know me who are listening to this going, wow, really? You used to not speak up, and I had to learn how to do it, and it didn't come naturally to me. So, I would advise, and it's a very different world now, and people seem to have a better understanding that you have a brand, your person have a brand, and how to build your own brand. And I think it pairs really nicely with the advice that Valerie gave, is that you do need to be honest and work hard. And if you don't want to work hard, recognize that and find the thing that fits you well, because it's really about being your true authentic self.
All right.
And I am watching, I know we've got 30 seconds, and this is going to sound kind of quirky. Write your own obituary. And what I mean by that is whatever the narrative, whatever the last thing you want people to say about you, you dictate that. You become your own editor, you become your own publisher, you become your own validator. And so I think if I were to, do not allow others to define who or what you are, what your capacity is. I remember the biggest problem, the trouble I got in one time. I went to the FCBA dinner with the most sparkly suit I had on and stood right there and I was crying inside. But I'm like, this will not be the end of me. So no matter how bad it gets, whatever the headlines are, you can recover. You write your own narrative. You are the captain of this. This is you. This is yours. Embrace it.
I love that. We're going to end on that. That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Commissioner Clyburn, Angie, and Valerie. This was a great way to start Ligado Connects. Thank you, everyone who joined and tuned in to listen in. Connect with us. Stay tuned. Send us your ideas, advice, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.